All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And good morning to everyone, wherever you are watching, wherever you are joining, whenever you are joining. A lot of people like to watch in replay or take it in on the podcast. That's cool too. We really love that you're part of our community. Mark Thompson here. We are welcoming back Kim to the show. Kim was not well yesterday.
Kim, how are you?
How are you today, Kim?
Kim, how are you?
I'm still not well. I'm still playing hurt, but I'm here and I'm making it happen.
Oh, all right. Well, you sound better, but you're saying that you don't feel better.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah, this is like day 9 of a cold I just can't shake.
Oh, sorry to hear that. How's Kim's level, Albert? She sounds a little low to me. Is she?
Kim, how are you?
A little low.
Okay. So, Kim, you want to crank your mic up a little bit. Meanwhile, the commissioner, Albert, is in the heat of the competition.
Albert, thank you.
This is the Sweet 16 and Mark's Madness. So we're going to update the celebrity bracket, I believe. And you'll update the voting from last night, Albert?
I'll update the celebrity bracket next hour. I'm still waiting on a couple of their votes, actually, so I could give an abbreviated update. But I have an update of the overall standings with everyone else.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, we'll get those updates going. And much to do today. It's a big guest day. So I'm going to leave the preliminaries at a minimum and get to our first guest, who will talk weather. Spencer Christian is friend of the show, award-winning broadcaster, Good Morning America guy. We'll get to him in just a second, but I do want to mention also today, it's John Rothmann Day. So bottom of the hour, we'll get to John Rothmann. We'll talk to him about Israel. We'll talk to him about the Mike Pence testimony will clearly happen now. We'll talk about any number of things that are related to politics. It's just sort of John Rothmann's thing. Then in the 11 o'clock hour, it's about the banking crisis worldwide. Dylan Ratigan, who is an award-winning broadcaster himself, best-selling author, created Fast Money. That show with Jim Cramer on CNBC was created by Dylan. Dylan joins us in the next hour, and he's amazing in his ability to break down complex economic situations so that you can understand. He's almost like your best college professor or your best high school professor. He's remarkable. And he'll talk about this banking crisis in a way that makes us understand one critical element that was wrapped up in SVB. One implicit thing, one thing that no one said, but that is absolutely clear and is critical to know. And we'll get to that in the next hour. And then finally, at 11:35 today, the award-winning writer, Academy Award-nominated writer, Billy Ray. He wrote Captain Phillips, Hunger Games. Look up Billy Ray. Google him. I'm so excited that he is here. So we have much to do.
Star-studded Mark Thompson show.
It is a star-studded show. Thank you for recognizing that.
Mark's Madness.
Before Spencer, I want to get to the two that will shake out a few more entries today. Today it'll be these two going up against each other.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Oh no, against...
Seriously? What the
So it's either Whoopi...
My bad. I'm sorry.
Or it's...
Seriously? What the
Vote for one or the other now in YouTube if you're watching live, or until midnight tonight in the community section of our YouTube channel. All right, Albert, tell us what happened last night, though, in terms of the two that were facing off against each other yesterday.
Yeah, so they both weren't close matchups. Where My Weed Smoker's At defeated We'll Do It Live, and Producer No Idea beats. They do this to me all the time.
Oh, so
producer,
the
drop that I hate the most is
producer.
Whoever is producing this
that
thing
moves on.
Has no idea what they're doing.
And
Where my weed smokers
that
at?
moves on to the next round. Okay.
Yeah, so they're in the Elite 8, and I'm looking good. I'm feeling good about Weed Smokers finally slaying that dragon that is producer has no idea what it's doing.
All right. So Albert doesn't like the producer drop because it, well, it's disparaging to the producer, of course.
It's co-signed by John Daly. He's texted me personally.
Okay. And John Daly's doing well in the competition. Again, we'll update that next hour. But right now and until midnight tonight, it's either...
My bad. I'm sorry.
It's either the Whoopi, my bad, I'm sorry, or the...
Seriously? What the
Yeah, one or the other. Now, without any
Quickly,
further...
here's the standings right here.
Oh, okay, great. these are the latest standings in Mark's Madness. So top of the leaderboard with only one loss is CBN. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, CBN Roro.
CBN Roro. Also top of the leaderboard, tied Sayo Jones.
Yeah, 2021 champion.
With only one loss. Yeah, 2021 champion is back and still rocking the leaderboard. Then you get to William Nilsson with only 2 losses. You can see joined by Russ, Carroll, Sabora. There are a lot of people with only 2 losses.
Yeah, so this is basically the top 10 here, and there's a lot more people down here which is just 3 losses. So it's there's a lot of great brackets out there. Not
pretty
quite
hotly
perfect,
contested, yeah. Yesterday we showed you that this guy was he's in the thick of it, but toward the bottom of the celebrity group. But that could all be changing as a result of the next couple of rounds. But right now we brought him in because there's a pretty major storm moving into California, has moved through in many areas. And anyway, let's get an update from Spencer Christian, everybody.
Hi, good morning, good morning. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Everything's great. It's great to have you on always. You know I enjoy it. It's kind of a weird dividend that this whole winter has paid. It's been an awful winter. My house is flooded, all kinds of issues. We've had levees break. We've had trucks blow over on the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. Any number of things. I'm just picking stuff randomly. But my point is there's record snow in the Sierra, impassable roads. But the one good thing is because of all this weather, I get to visit with you a little bit more, which is kind of nice.
And I get to appear semi-regularly on your show, which I love.
Yeah, it's very, very cool, man. We adore you. So tell us what's the latest? What's happening now?
So today we're going to have scattered showers, and this low-pressure system that's been sort of spinning, moving southward just off the California coastline is continuing its southward movement. So the atmosphere is very unstable. In addition to the likelihood of scattered showers throughout the day is the possibility, maybe even the probability of some isolated thunderstorms, which would feature, thunder and lightning and maybe even some small hailstones. And they can pop up anywhere, as you know. I mean, when we say scattered, we literally mean that. So there's no region of the Bay Area that's more likely than others to get these impacts I'm talking about.
Okay. So, and when you talk about an unstable air mass or instability in the atmosphere, it just means the tendency of air to rise quickly, right, Spencer? It's that instability just refers to that phenomenon, that the air rises quickly, and that's what produces the thunderstorms or showers.
That's right. And so, we might see a couple, maybe 3 of those isolated thunderstorms, but most of the area should just be on the lookout for those scattered showers and they may, although they're generally going to be light, they may feature brief downpours. So you may be driving and all of a sudden, the blue sky gives way to a little dark cloud and there's a downpour, and then, a minute later you're out of it. That's the kind of pattern we're in today.
And then after today, what happens, Spencer?
So tomorrow and Friday, we expect mainly sunny skies, dry conditions. So, after the winter we've had, we're thankful for a couple of consecutive sunny days. And then over the weekend, kind of an unsettled pattern. I know that term doesn't really mean much, but what it really means is that we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and there is a small chance of some light rain both days, Saturday and Sunday, but a greater chance that it'll be dry. But early next week, the last 3 Tuesdays we've had storms, right? We call them terrible Tuesdays. It looks like early next week, another system is developing that could be a Monday, Tuesday storm.
Now, is it too early for you to put a numerical value on that storm, or have you guys done that over Channel 7?
Yeah, we're calling it a 1 right now because we don't see the elements that would typically produce a really strong storm. Those elements don't seem to be in place. So it looks like it could be just a weak system, light rain, scattered showers. So we're calling it just a 1. But the National Weather Service has put in its summary something, I forget the exact wording now, but it's something like, we're still following the possibility that this could be a stronger storm.
Yeah. I mean, it's so far off that, some elements can change and you might have to pump it up.
Sure.
Love that you visit. Thank you so much. Now, I want you to take note of the fact that I am ghost white. I'm cadaverous. Look at me. I'm just
What?
no, against any normal person who has blood flowing through their veins, I look like a hospital patient that just snuck out.
That's
You know?
not fake. That's real.
Yeah. But with you, it really does produce contrast because you look great. I understand, you're African-American dude. I get it. But
There's
still,
never been anything like this.
It's like we're a before and after. You know what I mean? It's really brutal, man. I look so sickly.
You know, they
So
do
it's
this
pretty-
to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
If I get closer to the light, maybe I'll look a little whiter.
Oh, thank you. Would you? Yeah, that's love you and talk to you soon, Spencer Christian.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, man.
Love you guys.
ABC7 Spencer Christian. Check him out on the TV.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, we've had grim tasks lately, as you know, in national news related to the latest school shooting and the video out of that entire thing that shows the way in which law enforcement stormed the school and handled the situation with an active shooter. It's sobering, It's certainly sobering in being compared to the way that the Uvalde cops, who were armed to the teeth, it's Texas. So just in general, the population is a population with access to more guns and eagerly using more guns. It's more of a gun culture. And the law enforcement, of course, has access to any degree of military weaponry because, as we've discussed before, the military essentially dumps that off on local law enforcement agencies nationwide. The surplus, that is. Anyway, I mention this because you realize it's about tactics and it's about training and it's about courage. And you saw all of those things employed by those Nashville cops when they went in, right? You saw tactics, you saw courage, and take a look at we have a little package that we'll run, and it gives you a little bit of an overview as to what we know and how things were handled. Go ahead, Albert, if you'd run that, please.
Terrified, mourning, shock.
The city of Nashville and the nation coming to terms with the heartbreaking news of another mass school shooting.
Yeah, this is obviously, I'm going in.
Rifle first.
This is the
Rifle first. Blue, go. Go, 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 go.
rifle first. It's just three guys, pretty much.
Whoa. I'm with you.
The initial run is just three. And they move into a lobby area. This is for those listening to the
What
podcast.
happened and what led up to the massacre.
They're all locked down, but we have 2 kids that we don't know where they are.
Okay.
Among the 6 victims, 3 9-year-old students Evelyn Dykehouse, Hallie Scruggs, and William Kinney. 60-year-old Catherine Kuntz was also shot and killed, as well as 61-year-old Cynthia Peak and Mike Hill.
Let's go! Metro Police!
We now know the shooter is identified as 28-year-old Audrey Elizabeth Hale. Initially, investigators announced the mass shooter as a woman who is now being classified as a transgender man. Born a female, Hale's LinkedIn profile noted the use of he, him pronouns. Other social media indicated Hale went by the name Aiden rather than Audrey. Hale was shot and killed by police during the attack.
It's upstairs. It sounds like it's upstairs.
At about 10:13 a.m. on March 27th, the first call came in for the shooting at the Covenant School Nashville Private Christian School. Security camera video released by the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department shows the shooter arrive at the school at about 9:53 a.m. Minutes later, at 9:57 a.m., the shooter sends some messages to Averiana Patton, a former basketball teammate. Patton says she had not kept in contact with the shooter since they played together back in middle school. The shooter's messages read in part, quote, "You'll probably hear about me on the news after I die. This is my last goodbye." And
this is this whole play for infamy, I think, that is the grotesque part of this as well.
Evidence behind, but something bad is about to happen. At 10:10 a.m., the shooter opens fire at the school, shattering glass on a set of double doors.
This is why the idea
After
of like the door
Hill
not being
crawls through the openings and enters the school.
The shooter
Multiple
just shot the
angles of
door
security
open. I mean, you
footage
can
show
do
the
that.
shooter walking around the school, pointing their weapon. Investigators say Hale was armed with 2 rifles, a handgun, and significant ammunition.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to kill people when you're walking around a school with kids, an elementary school. You talk about a soft target.
It's locked.
And you're loaded to the teeth with weapons.
Less than 15 minutes later, at 10:13 a.m., the shooter was killed when officers Michael Colazzo and Rex Engelbert opened fire.
Go.
Okay, Albert, that's...
A later search of the
this is... Yeah, I'm sorry. Continue for another minute or
the
two.
discovery of a manifesto. Police also say Hale created detailed maps of the school, highlighting possible entry points. Nashville officials say the shooter also conducted surveillance on the school before the shooting. They've since confirmed Hale was once a student at the school.
Okay, so that's the experts they spoke with and the experts that, and by the way, that expert's been on our show on KGO when we were there. He essentially is doing a treatise on mass shootings, but in America, I guess that's the only place you could do a treatise like that, since it's not really much of a phenomenon in other countries. But he's talking about the connection to the school. Oftentimes there is some sort of connection to wherever these places are that end up being staging grounds for these massacres. But in the case of schools, it's oftentimes a former student or former employee, someone with a grievance. It's a little unclear here. There is also, as you're aware, several other locations that are noted. There was a plan, a fairly well thought out plan on the part of this person to not only shoot up this school, but then to go on to a mall. And they had a lot of weaponry. The shooter had legally purchased multiple firearms from 5 Nashville area gun stores, all legally, right? As I just said. The thing about Tennessee, I just thought you might be interested in this, is that Tennessee has enacted a law that lets most Tennesseans 21 and older, it lets most of them carry handguns without first clearing a background check.
What?
In fact, you don't have to get a permit in Tennessee or get trained on firearms safety.
I thought those were federal rules that you had to do that. Wow.
Once you're 21, you are allowed to carry handguns without clearing a background check or even getting permit or training.
Wild.
State lawmakers in the Republican-controlled legislature are considering numerous pieces of gun legislation to make firearms even more prevalent in Tennessee. One bill, sponsored by Senator John Stevens of Huntington and Representative Rusty Grills of New Bern, would drop that age from 21 to 18. The House version would let people carry rifles and shotguns in public without a permit. This is all moving through the Tennessee legislature now. Another bill that's moving through would allow faculty or school staff members to carry a concealed handgun. The things that are being said, Governor Bill Lee said he signed this controversial law to loosen restrictions for gun ownership and has questioned the effectiveness of red flag laws. You know, Tennessee's not a red flag state. Red flag is where you can essentially get a restraining order against someone from them owning a gun. You know, family members and others can essentially call it out, right? So Lee is saying, I don't really believe they're effective. And so gun access that would be restricted by red flag laws, not really germane, because they're not going to, in Tennessee, you just don't have the support of the governor in that regard.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, you know, thoughts and prayers, right? That's what you...
A couple things struck me first about this video that you showed, that we had to wait a while for video from Uvalde. And this video from Nashville is out like that, really fast. I mean, clearly the Uvalde people had something to hide, but it's just interesting how quickly it happened.
Well,
and the other thing is
just a note on before the other thing. Let me just say this: you'll remember also in the hours after Uvalde, in the days after Uvalde, certainly the first 2 days, they had a narrative that was completely opposite the actual facts.
Oh, yeah.
They made a completely fictional narrative, and you'll also remember that I called it as BS when they were saying it. I said this is total BS what they're saying. And indeed it was. And so to your point, they were covering up the cowardice and the incompetence that cost all those kids their lives. Anyway, go ahead. What's the second
Because
point?
they knew then they should be humiliated. The other thing is that this morning I'm in bed and my 9-year-old scoots in. My 9-year-old. 3 9-year-olds died in this shooting in Nashville. And so I'm cuddling him up and scooping him up, and I'm kissing him on the top of the head, and I'm thinking how lucky I get to do that. How lucky that I am that I get to hold my little boy and these other parents don't. And then I'm thinking, God, that's a really low bar I'm setting. This is where I picked to live in this world, that I feel lucky that I get to hold my child and give him some love.
Yeah.
That's the bar. That's now
pathetic. Yeah.
I mean, how is that? That should be normal.
Right.
That should be expected, a normal part of my life. And now I'm feeling grateful for it. I mean, I can't even.
Right. Send my kid to school, and I have to worry about the school getting shot up by somebody with military weaponry that they bought easily. Yeah, I'm not really monitoring the chat. You can tell me what if there's anything we need to pay attention to. But in any case, you can participate in the chat and throw in your comments, and we look at the chat comments later. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, if you just want to be part of our community from the standpoint of weighing in on anything you hear, I mean, it doesn't have to be serious even, but you can always put comments in after the fact as you watch in replay, and we look at those comments as well. But it's a sad state that we are in as a nation and as a people. And you realize that this is utter insanity and utter perversion of the Constitution and, enough said. It's a sad, sad state. Sadly, we'll be talking about this more, and I might have some added content today, a special video with someone from Canada who grew up in America on military bases around the U.S. where there were guns everywhere, but the guns are locked up on military bases. And now he lives in Canada. So I'm going to try to do a video with him a little bit later. And you should hit that notification bell. That way, if we do a special added content video, you will get at least a notification that it's on. You don't have to watch it, but at least you'll know that it's up. So, Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There were quakes in the Bay Area, yes. Did you feel any of them? 3.5 quake and a pair of 2.6 aftershocks. It was in the morning. Albert, you didn't mention it to me. You didn't feel it in Union City?
Maybe I just slept through it, but no, I didn't feel anything. I didn't see. Usually, when an earthquake happens, like literally everyone I follow, because they're all local to my area, you'll see it on Twitter. It's undeniable. You'll just see everybody. It's like you get your earthquake news on Twitter. But no, I did not see anything.
Yeah. And of course, Kim didn't feel anything because North Bay, you're not going to feel anything. I think it's just too far away from the epicenter. But just a reminder, isn't it? I mean, it really is a reminder. And related to the planet, NOAA. That's the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. That's under them, the National Weather Service, but there's a whole lot of stuff under NOAA. And the extreme nature of a lot of the kinds of weather events that we're seeing nationwide, and you're seeing extreme weather all over the world, but NOAA's concerned primarily with, the U.S., they are now changing the way they're doing forecasts because the climate change and the climate crisis is producing such intense weather systems. 18 separate billion-dollar weather or climate disasters showed up in the U.S. in 2022. 18 different billion-dollar disasters in terms of the damage done, right? It cost $165 billion in damages. And of course, they're deadly, these disasters as well. 474 people died either directly or indirectly from those storms. So the U.S. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration is in charge of tracking weather and disseminating forecasts, and they are now trying to change the way and change the manner in which they focus on extreme weather events. They're saying a new generation of private companies is also joining this effort to forecast weather and severe weather. So the weather forecasting services industry has grown. You know, it used to just be the National Weather Service and a couple of independent companies like AccuWeather. Now, the weather forecasting services industry in the U.S. estimated to be worth about $17.4 billion. One of these companies is in Alameda. It's called Saildrone. Yeah, and they all claim to be using various technologies and what? AI, right? To change the way weather forecasting is being done. So, but there's no question that the weather is more intense, and now there's more of a rush to fill the void of what's viewed as sort of traditional forecasting that may leave you short of where you want to be. So your mileage may vary, but your forecast may as well, as it turns out.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am wondering about the Giants, Commissioner. Do you have any thoughts as the baseball season gets underway?
It's the bar was set really low this offseason. You know, we didn't really do much. We got a couple interesting players. We have good players, but not quite like the players that would bring you to the park. They lowered the concession prices, so that's something.
No. Well, there's we have a choice. We can either aggressively go out and sign some stars, or we can just lower the price of tacos and burgers. What do you think? Just cheaper to lower the price.
I mean, the prices were kind of getting out of hand, so I'm glad they're doing that. And I think they did see the dip in. Obviously, we didn't have the greatest of seasons last year, so I think they did see a decline in people coming to the park. So despite how beautiful it is, you got to put out a good product. So hopefully they're good this year. We have, like I said, good players, not great players. We'll see how if they all play good collectively, play well collectively, all the good could be turned into a great situation.
Oh, so that's nice. Okay, well, that's a good way to look at it. Thank you, Albert, for that. That's a nice
Albert. Thank you.
I mean,
I want Shohei Ohtani. His contract is expiring next year, and I want to throw the bag. We'll throw the bag at him.
That would be extraordinary. That would be, yeah. All of SVB he can have now. Did I do this story or not? I'm going to ask you straight up. Did I the story about the 2 California cities, the top 10 most livable? You weren't here yesterday, Kim, but I don't think I did it. Did I, Albert?
No, we did not.
Okay. So can I, because this is a real surprise. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'll do this quickly. I've got on deck John Rothmann, the great John Rothmann, and then we get into economics and the ripple effect from the banking crisis. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. It seems to have been backburnered quickly by the feds, but there was a huge secret in all of it. And then, of course, the Academy Award-nominated writer of Hunger Games and Captain Phillips, the brilliant writer-director Billy Ray in the 11 o'clock hour. But right now, I wanted to ask you, there are 2 California cities that are deemed among the most livable in the United States. I know we always hear it. California, the taxes are too high, it's too crowded, there's all the homeless. But there are 2 California cities that are among the top 10 most livable in all the U.S. Now, before you guess, I will tell you they break the cities down in work environments and available employment, learning environments, hanging out, I guess they consider that just sort of the general vibe, and enjoying oneself, nightlife, okay? What 2 California cities are among the top 10 most livable in the U.S.? I will take guesses now in the chat. And if you're watching in replay, you can guess in replay. You will get full points awarded if you guess correctly. And I will also tell you, in the top 20, Sunnyvale and San Francisco are in the top 20, but they're not in the top 10. This is the top 10. I'm seeing Fremont, seeing San Jose, Sonoma and Eureka. Fresno? I don't think Fresno would be in there, or maybe, I don't know. Stockton and Lodi. You think it's Watts, Eddie, do you? Yeah, Atherton. Atherton wouldn't make it because it's too expensive. You go ahead and you can put them up there, Kim. A few more guesses, and then I'm going to give you the answer. The top 10 most livable cities in the U.S., 2 of them are in California. Of course, Albert guesses Union City under our banner, right? Fremont and El Cerrito, San Mateo, Pleasanton, says Ron. Again, it's for learning, working, hanging out, and generally enjoying oneself. The answers: Berkeley and Irvine, everyone. That's right. Berkeley and Irvine place 6th and 7th on this 2023 edition of the list. They were 8th and 10th last year. They're 6th and 7th this year. But as I say, in the top 20, Sunnyvale, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. So the Bay Area well represented in the top 20 if you consider Berkeley as well.
Even in downtown Berkeley, they got a lot of nice nightlife out there. It's and then Irvine has a lot of those eateries that are really cool to go to. So, you know, that's where some of these guesses were good, like on paper, like livable, like from the guests. But I was thinking, well, not quite the nightlife is here in some of these cities.
Exactly. Right. There's no nightlife in Atherton. Plus, it's too expensive. The most livable city in the U.S., you may be curious, you know, they decided after evaluating all of those elements, Cambridge, Massachusetts is the most livable. It has Harvard there, right? Yeah. Offers residents an urban feel, they say, with numerous bars, restaurants, coffee shops, and parks. The public schools are also excellent, according to them. The second place behind Cambridge, Massachusetts, most livable city in the U.S., is Arlington, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. It jumped. Oh, there's some Arlington, Virginia fans. All right. It jumped up from 4th place in 2022. The median home value in Arlington is $755,800. It got the highest possible grade when it comes to public schools, family friendliness, and nightlife. So the third place is the Houston suburb of the Woodlands. Yeah, so there's that. Smash the like button.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Yeah, smash the like button. Give us a thumbs up. Kim will take a brief pause for news because she's not feeling 100%. And then the great John Rothmann joins. So much to do today.
The Mark Thompson Show.
And this is the Kim McAllister on the Mark Thompson Show. If you would like to sponsor this newscast or any part of the Mark Thompson Show, please email us at themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. And let us begin with the former president. The Manhattan grand jury investigating former President Trump is now breaking for a month. Reports say the break was previously planned. The decision whether to indict Trump for alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels to cover up an affair will now not happen until late April at the very earliest. So if you are holding your breath, waiting for the orange jumpsuit and the handcuffs, wait no more.
There's never been anything like this.
Wow.
No, sorry, you're going to have to hold. Keep on waiting. There is a citywide candlelight vigil being held this evening in the Nashville area after this week's school shooting that left 3 kids and 3 adults dead. I do have a picture of one of the girls that have passed away. Her name is Haley. She is 9 years old. She is the one of the pastor's daughters. Also had a picture of another little girl, which I can't make come on the screen right now. Her name was Evelyn. It's the saddest story.
Yeah, we showed the pictures in that part of that package that we showed from the TV.
The local
TV news report, and you could see, and the administrators, the other people, the adults who were all 61 years old who lost their lives.
Yeah, it's really sad. The candlelight vigil taking place this evening, bringing out local leaders like the mayor, John Cooper. They're expected to gather in a public park meant to honor the lives of the victims and lift up the survivors and the families of the Covenant School, where a former student apparently opened fire Monday. Newly released body cam footage, which you saw here on the Mark Thompson Show, shows officers fatally shooting the suspect inside. The vigil this evening to be held this evening. The FDA is greenlighting over-the-counter sales of Narcan. They expect to do that by late this summer. So that might be something that saves a lot of lives. This means that, the drug can reverse opioid overdoses, and it will be available without a prescription. So Narcan.
Well, and it also it's also a sign of how drugs proliferate our culture, sadly, in our society, to the point that we need to make this over the counter. It's just,
Well,
sad
and we
comment.
do. I mean, we absolutely do need to make it over the counter,
but that
because
doesn't mean that it's a good thing.
No, it is a good thing. I think it is a good thing. I mean, you had to do it.
A statistic: this opioid epidemic killed 107,000 Americans in 2021, mostly from fentanyl overdoses. So that's why it's necessary, right?
Right. And the other thing I would say just quickly is that the new drug that's out, as you know, the sort of the new fentanyl 4.0 is this, and I forget, it slips my mind right this instant, but it's a drug that can't be treated. Overdoses can't be treated by this Narcan. So, So we have to figure a way to handle that as it begins to enter into the marketplace of illegal drugs across the country.
You would think drug dealers would want to keep their customers alive. I don't know why they're finding new ways to kill people. Narcan is administered as a nasal spray. It is credited with saving thousands of lives over the last few years. This drug, made by Emergent Biosolutions, they haven't disclosed the over-the-counter price, but a nonprofit group says it's likely to be about $47 for a 2-spray kit, if you wanted to carry that around just in case. The tech leaders are calling the race to make artificial intelligence as advanced as humans dangerous. In an open letter signed by 12 innovators, including Elon Musk and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, they urged for a 6-month pause on the development of human-level intelligence, saying this represents a risk to society. Musk, who is actually one of OpenAI's co-founders, has criticized that organization a number of times recently, saying he believes it is diverging from its original purpose. OpenAI makes the popular Chat GPT-4, released earlier this month, is thought to be far more advanced than its predecessor.
Well, I mean, it's an odd thing for Elon Musk to weigh in on. He's got that ridiculous Neuralink thing going, which is the most absurd thing, where you're trying to plant a chip in people's brains. Of course, he's working with animals, and you have to do it while they're still, you can't anesthetize them because you're trying to figure out whether the chip is working. So, I mean, even as he's doing that, he's telling me that AI is getting, too far out ahead of itself, and it could be a dangerous thing. I mean, Elon Musk is I'm sorry. The jury has come and gone on him for me.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly AI is an issue. I mean, I don't think that's pointing out much. No one's going to take a pause on AI any more than they're going to take a pause on any other kind of technology. Yeah.
No, they're really not. It's full steam ahead. And, I don't know. You were speaking, though, about animals. And I do have this story to end with about animals. I'm going to get you a little picture of dolphins up. Oh, there they are. They're so cute and so wonderful. Well, you would think that Hawaii authorities busted 33 people for allegedly harassing a pod of wild dolphins in the waters off the Big Island, happened off Hanau. It's against federal law to swim within 50 yards of spinner dolphins near Hawaii's nearshore waters. This is because of concerns that so many tourists were swimming with dolphins that these nocturnal animals weren't getting the rest they need during the day to be able to forage for food at night. The animal experts say it might look like dolphins are awake during the day, but really half their brain is kind of closed down and sleeping as they float and swim in the waters. They come awake at night to feed on crustaceans. So you're supposed to stay away from them. But that is not what happened. Aerial footage shot by drone shows snorkelers following these dolphins, the dolphins trying to swim away. The police department saying its video and photos showed swimmers appeared to be aggressively pursuing, corralling, and harassing this pod. Law enforcement officers contacted the group while they were in the water, said, "Don't do this, it's a violation." And then uniformed officers met the swimmers on land, where state and federal officials launched a joint investigation. So now 33 of these swimmers that were allegedly harassing these dolphins may be facing charges.
Good.
Good day, sir.
Exactly. I mean, that's I don't know. I mean, the harassment of wildlife, the harassment of animals, well, as you know, I have no patience for it at all. You can lock them up and throw away the key as far as I'm concerned. That's not a tough one. There's right and wrong, and then they've warned you, and you still do it? Come on, guys.
I understand the desire to swim with dolphins. It seems like such a wonderful thing to do, and idyllic in the Hawaiian waters and the wildlife and beautiful, but you don't understand that what you're doing is actually hurting them. So
exactly.
The laws are in place for a reason. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
Do you feel it? It's The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim is right. Kim is right. How about a little respect for Kim? Yeah. Very, very good, Kim. Nice job. Playing hurt, I might say, Kim McAllister is today. This guy is with us every Wednesday. I look forward to it. He's such a mind on so many things when it comes to political history, when it comes to geopolitics. That's why his show was so very popular on KGO, and he continues to be very popular on the lecture circuit and all the other outlets that John Rothmann frequents. Again, he's with us on Wednesdays at this time. Please welcome John Rothmann, everyone. Hey, John Rothmann.
Good morning. Can I just follow up on one thing? I listened with great attention to the latest report you gave on the gun shooting. And I have to tell you, if there is one thing for which there can be no tolerance at this point in our lives, it is the Republican Party's refusal to do anything about the question of guns. Joe Biden has again called for action, and again the Republicans downplay it, won't do a thing. The legislation is going nowhere because the Republicans control Congress. This is a far cry from 1994, when the Republicans didn't have the votes. The Democrats had the votes, and there was a weapons ban that was implemented. Dianne Feinstein and Joe Biden led that battle. All I can say is every time I hear about another report of a shooting, I get more and more upset. And if ever there was going to be a protest that was nationwide by Democrats, Republicans, by old, by young, by all who care, the time has come when this shooter was able to buy 7 weapons and there were no controls. All I can say is there is something definitely wrong. And what I regret to say, Mark, is we will probably have this discussion again and again and again, and it's just too much.
When you mention the protest, I think that's such a great thing to mention, because I feel as though if they really did take to the streets in big enough numbers, maybe something would get done.
Well, you wanted to mention a bit about Israel. That's exactly what happened in Israel. You saw the ultimate in democracy, when what you saw was a million plus Israelis going into the streets, and the government finally had to respond. There ought to be such an effort here in the United States of America when it comes to guns. We ought to have people out in the streets and really protesting and demanding action. And frankly, the holdup are the Republicans, and they're the ones on whom the heat should be leveled.
Yeah, and of course that's true. And this is, I get into arguments sometimes with my friends on the left when I point this out, but because that's clearly true, full stop. GOP to me, they're the evildoers in this gun question. But that said, with control of both houses, it was not possible to get the assault weapons ban passed with the Democrats. It was, John, that's a shame on that party also.
The pressure, but I understand that, but I want to make clear that the obstruction in Congress today, not the Democrats, it's the Republicans. And
agreed.
This is something where the American people need to come together. And if anything, the Democrats ought to be drawing a line in the sand as we approach the next presidential election and make these demands. The power of the NRA needs to be broken.
And it's not even just the NRA, John Rothman. I'd say that there's a fetishization of guns in this country. There's this fetishization of the military in this country. We've lost our way. There's a machismo that's displaced. You're seeing it in political ads, John. They're with assault rifles. You see literally dozens of political ads with these right-wingers shooting off guns.
You're right, Mark. Can you imagine that there is any reason why the military surplus involving semi-automatic and automatic weapons should be for general sale? It's absolutely ludicrous. And again, I want to point out, I believe that you could have a bipartisan effort, but you don't have a Republican leadership that is willing to do that. And part of that is the amount of money which is contributed by the NRA to Republican candidates. And I make no bones about leveling that charge, which I believe is absolutely true.
I want to go back to Israel, then I'll double back to Georgia, which I'm seeing as a question in the chat. In Israel, you mentioned the protests on the street. And maybe you can just set the scene for us again, what Netanyahu is trying to do with that government. But I also then want to ask you, is it just the protests, or wasn't it the case that some of his top ministers, top minister of defense, said, "Hey, I'm not down with this, man. If you want to try this thing where you're skipping over you can talk about changing the judiciary. I'm going to resign." And so you began to lose. He began to lose his government in a way.
You're absolutely right, and I think it's very important to point out that this situation in Israel resulted from Benjamin Netanyahu trying to survive. He has a very narrow coalition. There is no government of Israel that has ever been formed without a coalition. You need 61 seats to form a government. Right now, Netanyahu has 64. The action he has taken is to try to do two things. One, to preserve his parliamentary majority, and two, is to prevent himself from going to jail. That's fundamentally what it boils down to. There are charges against him that have been leveled. So what has to happen now? He's declared a moratorium until after Passover, which begins this Tuesday evening. And so it'll be another at least 10 to 12 days simply because of the Knesset coming back into session. But he's determined to go ahead. And look, I have to tell you honestly, somebody asked me, is democracy in Israel threatened? The answer is no, because we saw democracy in action when people on the left and the right, including academics, including business people, who go into the streets. You saw Prime Minister Netanyahu's own defense minister, Gallant, take a stand, and for that he was fired. So I am reassured by Israeli democracy. We have a similar problem here in the United States, whether it's guns or the question of Donald Trump. This is a real issue. I was scared out of my wits last week when Donald Trump spoke at a rally in Texas, in Waco, Texas, calling for violence against the United States. It's just nuts. And so there's a real problem to the challenge that we all face. But let me be clear. I believe that just as the United States is a vital, vibrant democracy, so I believe Israel is a vital, vibrant democracy. And as long as those democracies and people in those countries embrace that concept, then we will all be strengthened. The fact that Netanyahu had to retreat is a good thing. I'm waiting, frankly, for the Republicans, whether it comes to guns or Donald Trump, to repeat that concept of retreating in the face of real opposition.
This is an interesting comment in the chat, just in terms of the numbers. Israel had 1 million in the streets. Population is about 9.6 million, so 20% of the population in the streets. I don't know, by the way, if that math is quite right, but maybe it is. I don't know. For us, anyway, I'm just more about the comment. For us, that would be the same as about 30 to 40 million in the streets on the question of gun legislation or whatever. You could get that. I mean, but it would be, there has to be a mobilization. There has to be a will. Now, I want to ask you about what's happening in Georgia. I saw a question. Please talk about what is happening in Georgia and their attempts to get rid of their attorney general in order to close the case on Trump. This is the other state case against Trump. Our guys, I only need 11,780 vote case, right?
Well, the simple fact of the matter is you can't get rid of an elected official. And so what's going to happen in Georgia is really a process now where there is a potential indictment of Donald Trump for election interference. The Georgia grand jury has not yet issued its conclusion, but there's little doubt what's going to happen, that Donald Trump will face charges in Georgia no matter what happens in the charges dealing with Stormy Daniels, which is, in my mind, important because he violated the law. But it's even more important that we deal with the question of the insurrection or an attempt to subvert an American election. And I think that any effort that Donald Trump or his people have to remove Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, it's absurd. He was just reelected, and I have every confidence, I have to have confidence in the idea that in the end, sanity will prevail, and Donald Trump is not above the law. What concerned me was a poll that I read this morning that showed that 70% of Republicans would still vote for him for president of the United States. That to me is absolutely astounding because the cult of personality here and the concept that the Republican Party, as Donald Trump Jr. said on the Ellipse, is no longer the Republican Party, it's the party of Donald Trump, is profoundly disturbing. I was interested to note that Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, who was one of Trump's strong supporters and who was nearly Trump's vice president, we should remind people, is saying he will not vote for Trump for president again. He absolutely will not. And he pointed out that at that Waco rally, Donald Trump had the audacity not only to have a choir singing these songs, people who were in jail for the insurrection, but then showed scenes of the insurrection and the violence as if to applaud it. If that isn't a disqualifier, I don't know what is. And let me quickly, because I know our time is short, say a word about Mike Pence. I was
just about to get to that. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
I'm just watching.
No, I love it. Yeah. But just set the scene. There's just been a federal judge in D.C. has now ordered Pence to testify. Isn't that right?
Yes. And this morning, Mike Pence spoke, and he said he will comply with the law. He didn't say he wouldn't appeal, and the appeal could go all the way to the Supreme Court. But it is now clear to me that Mike Pence is going to have to testify, and that these claims of executive privilege, which do not apply in the case of Donald Trump or Mike Pence, are going to be thrown out. And that in the end, as I say, it may take time, but somebody talked to me about the time frame. Let me remind you, the Watergate break-in was in June of 1972. Nixon did not resign until August 9th, 1974. So 2 years and a few months. The same thing applies here. The wheels of justice may turn slowly, but wherever you turn and you look at where Donald Trump is today, the wheels are turning. Let me also make a word about his potential opposition. I do not see a responsible Republican. Ron DeSantis and what he is pulling in Florida with education and pulling books off the shelves is one of the most appalling things I've ever seen from an elected public official. And I don't think DeSantis, were he to run, I think he'd be defeated overwhelmingly. I think that Trump, by the way, no matter what the polls show, Trump would be defeated as well. The Republicans, in order to be a viable political party, have to find a candidate who they can run. And, the names that come to mind, like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, they simply don't have a chance in the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And that, by the way, is another American political tragedy, that there is not a viable two-party system which can really exercise these kinds of issues. So if you are a Republican, you better concentrate on rebuilding your own political party, because we need that to happen.
Well, just because you were talking about the poll and the reaction to Trump and that 70% would still vote for him, there is a quest for control of the country. So if that's the candidate and the poll comes to you and says, would you vote for Donald Trump? Because this is exactly how the poll goes down. If he were the nominee versus Joe Biden, and you want control of the country again, you want control of the country for religious reasons, you want control of the country because for reasons that you associate with spending or defense or whatever concocted BS you get your head around. I mean, I think the GOP has so lost their way. I don't know that they ever had it, but they've really lost their way. You vote for Trump. That's your party. If you want more Supreme Court nominees that are conservative. You want more federal judges that are conservative.
If you want no gun control.
You want no gun control. You have to vote for Trump.
If you want a woman not to have the right to choose.
Thank you.
All I'm
That's
saying
exactly
is
it.
the Democratic Party has to stand firmly, solidly, articulately on these issues, and they have to challenge the country on this. I would rather see an election lost, to be honest with you, standing on principles that are so clear in my mind. And I hope that the Democratic Party is able to assert that. And I hope the lesson we have learned in Israel, where when an individual tries to violate the process, that the country stands up and fights back. But the same thing applies with the Republican Party here in the United States.
I'm going to mention one name to you, and then I have a gift that I'm going to bestow upon you publicly. First, the name. The name in politics that, because you're talking about a viable candidate that's being spoken of, is the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin is a conservative. I mean, again, whatever the hell that means. But I mean, he's a right winger, but he's viewed as a more palatable right winger than, some of those that, you'd find yourself with a DeSantis or a Trump. Obviously, Trump's just an incompetent, self-referential dude. But Youngkin is thought of as, more mainstream and a guy who, if he entered the race, might have a chance of winning. I think the political realities, I'm wondering if you agree with me, are that, hey, it's Trump's party, as you say. I don't care who you've got standing on the sideline. The quarterback is Trump until he decides to pull himself out of the game. But Youngkin is talked about increasingly as someone who would be, again, more palatable.
I don't see Youngkin. His political record is also very far to the right, as you pointed out, and I think he would suffer the same exposure. I just don't see him as a viable candidate. Look, let me explain. Richard Nixon once said to me that 70% of a president's time is consumed with foreign policy. And DeSantis just made a huge mess on the issue of Ukraine. And I have to feel the same way about Youngkin. He has no foreign policy background. And the last thing you want in a very dangerous world where the Russians are now dispatching a nuclear capability to its neighbor in Belarus. This is nuts. And right. It brings the world closer to real concerns. We need to have someone who has that grasp of foreign policy.
Well, of course you're right in terms of competence, but the last guy couldn't find Belarus on a map of Belarus. I mean, he was Donald Trump had no geopolitical sense. It does come down to cult of personality. So if Youngkin, again, just to run that out, could possibly catch fire enough with media so that he'd have that dynamic of charisma to win.
He doesn't have charisma. He does not have charisma. Yeah. I don't see it. But let me correct myself and say, if you'd asked me about Jimmy Carter at an equivalent time in 1975, he didn't have charisma either.
Oh, that's right. I forget the old John Rothman before he found the Lord. All right, now let me tell you what I found for you, because I know you're a fan of hers. And I'm not as big a fan of hers, but look at what I found. It is a Kamala Harris finger puppet. That's right, John. I found a Kamala Harris finger puppet for you. Hello, John. Thank you for your support.
I can tell you, having interviewed her live in studio, I was the first radio talk show she ever appeared on. She wrote me a lovely note thanking me for it. I can tell you, don't rule her out. Remember that if something happens and she becomes president of the United States between now and November of next year, she will be the Democratic candidate for president of the United States. And then what an interesting campaign that would be. But thank you.
Yeah.
You're not giving me the finger. You're giving me the
I'll be counting on your support if I'm the nominee.
There's never been anything like this.
I love you on Wednesdays. The finger puppet is in the mail to you. You can keep it proudly. And if her candidacy indeed comes to pass,
I shall put it,
use it as you wish.
Right next to my Richard Nixon bubblehead.
Oh, my God.
Let me just show you. Somebody just sent me this. I think you can see it if I hold it up. This is a thimble from the 1950 Nixon campaign. My sister-in-law, Renee, gave it to me as a birthday present. So
you don't want to take it out of the bag, John? Why, you don't want to damage it? What's the story on that?
When you have political items like I have, and I have a vast array,
I see.
much to my wife's chagrin, you don't want to damage it. But let me just say, when you mentioned the finger, and I'm thinking about the finger, I thought I'd really stick it to you with a thimble.
Oh, I love it. All right. Yes, I will ding array. And chagrin, I will ding. All right. He's John Rothmann. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Love seeing you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, we are running behind, but I'm very excited about March Madness.
Mark's Madness.
There are two playing off against each other. The first two from the last hour were...
My bad. I'm sorry.
And
seriously, what the
yeah, you vote for one or the other. Either
my bad. I'm sorry.
Or
seriously, what the
only one moves on to the next round. You go to our channel, the Mark Thompson Show channel. You'll see home, videos, playlists, community. You vote in the community section of that channel till midnight tonight. Good luck. I'm excited. Don't know if there are any early returns on that, Albert, but you can let us know if there's any important information, Commissioner, on Mark's Madness and how it's progressing.
Yeah, it's a dead heat. It's 50-50 actually right now.
Oh, it's a dead. This is where it gets interesting.
All right, so the live chat here is 50-50, so this will really depend on the community vote, which you could vote twice. If you did vote here in the live show, you can go in there and in the community
What?
vote again. So if you really want your brackets to survive, you could go there, vote in the community tab, because this is a dead heat.
Oh my gosh! So vote in the community section of our YouTube channel. That's how you get there. You click on it, you'll get to the Mark Thompson Show channel, and there, as I say, it'll say home, videos, playlists, shorts, and community is one of those things. You click on community and it's all there. You can also leave comments and do all the rest there as well. Next hour, which is already this hour in a second, it's two other favorites going up against each other. I'll share those with you as we continue, and then our conversation with Dylan Ratigan about the worldwide banking system. He's a brilliant guy, and he breaks it all down. So smash the like button like a boss
with your iron rod.
as we get a quick update from the ailing Kim McAllister.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I am Kim McAllister, and let's go right to the news, because there's top Democrat now telling Americans that he is sorry Democrats don't have enough votes to pass gun safety legislation. Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin's comments coming after 3 children and 3 adults were killed at a school in Nashville on Monday. Durbin of Illinois said the current likelihood that they consider gun safety legislation is minimal. He says Americans must know where their representatives or candidates stand on issues of gun safety. Meantime, Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said all the facts must be gathered when it comes to putting forward any legislation on guns. Any possible indictment against former President Trump won't happen until late April. That is according to reports out today that say the Manhattan grand jury investigating Trump is breaking now for a month. Meanwhile, there is a new poll showing some mixed signals on how the former president, who is facing multiple state and federal investigations, would fare in a race. According to a new Quinnipiac University poll, 57% of Americans think that if criminal charges are filed against him, Trump should be disqualified from running again for president, while 38% say it shouldn't matter. Meantime, 75% of Republicans polled say if criminal charges are filed, it shouldn't disqualify Trump from running. So a lot of discrepancy in those numbers. Looks like 23% think it should disqualify him. The poll also showed when Trump is matched up against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's widely believed to be eyeing a run for president, that Trump has a double-digit lead. A lawsuit in Montana might put an end to the use of a common firefighting tool. Forest conservation advocates are trying to stop aerial crews with the U.S. Forest Service from dropping foam retardant on forested areas, specifically the fluorescent pink foam that you see dropping from the aircraft. They say it's expensive, ineffective, and that it pollutes rivers and streams. Now, the Forest Service is defending its use, saying because of it, countless acres of forest remain unburned, and it's impossible to calculate how many homes and lives have been saved. So this is a hard one. Do we, stop the wildfire or stop the pollution?
Yeah, that really is a tough one. They can't, I guess, find a chemical agent that will not be toxic and polluting. I mean,
I would
really,
hope
really
someone's
tough.
looking for that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's research being done, but still, man, that's a very tough situation. That's in Montana, is that what you said?
Yeah, that they're trying to stop it in Montana.
But I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah, the actual
Right.
technology
It's
is
being
everywhere.
used all over the place. You've seen it dropped here in California as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So California is stepping up efforts now to help more storm victims recover and rebuild. Governor Gavin Newsom expanding the state of emergency yesterday to Alameda, Marin, Modoc, and Shasta counties. He's also asking President Biden to declare a major disaster for these 9 counties. It's Calaveras, Kern, Los Angeles, Mariposa, Monterey, San Benito, Santa Cruz, Tulare, and Tuolumne. Some were already approved for the waves of storms that hit in January, but this will now cover flooding, snow, mudslides, and avalanches that have happened since February 21st. And a new California law aims to protect drivers at the pump. And Governor Gavin Newsom, here he is, signing it yesterday, signed into law the nation's first penalty for high gas prices yesterday. It lets state regulators fine oil companies for making too much money after they raked in record profits last year. Governor Newsom says it will end the oil industry's days of operating in the shadows. The Attorney General echoed that, adding it is about accountability and transparency. The law starts on June 26th. So all the money they've already made, it's already in their pocket. We're not getting that back.
There's that. Right. They made a huge killing over the last couple of years. Right.
The question is, does this have any teeth and will it really help? Yeah.
Right. And there are ways to play with the bottom line, et cetera. But,
There is a Florida principal resigning after she sent $100,000 from the school's account to a scammer posing as Elon Musk. Jan McGee admitted she spent months talking to the scammer online, hoping to get Musk to invest millions of dollars into the Burns Science Technology Charter School in Oak Hill in exchange for an upfront investment. When the school's business manager learned McGee had sent that check, he canceled it before it was cashed. Thank the Lord. McGee abruptly resigned from her job after that story got out. I'm Kim McAllister on The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Well, I'm humbled by that introduction, but thank you. It is a pleasure to have you with us on this Wednesday. We have on deck a conversation about the banking system, what happened at SVB. Dylan Ratigan joins us. He's a brilliant mind. You've seen him on CNBC. He's a best-selling author and a guy who just knows world economics like nobody and can break it down for us like nobody else also. That's what's so great. Right now, and I'll mention also the second half of this hour, the award-winning writer of Captain Phillips and the Hunger Games and a bunch of other projects that we'll get to as well. Billy Ray joins us, so it's a really big hour. And right now we're in the middle of Mark's Madness. Yeah. 2 more drops go up against each other this half hour and this hour and until midnight tonight, I should say. You'll vote for either...
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Or you'll vote for...
What?
Yes, it's Oprah's...
What?
Against...
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Vote for Oprah's what or wild idea, and you can do it till midnight in the community section of our channel. Very exciting. These drops are all tough to predict. This is where you get the dead heat. This is where every vote counts. So good luck. Vote early. And as Albert says, you can even vote often if you want to. Mark Thompson's show.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It is a thrill to welcome someone to this mix who can really break down economics and finance and has operated at the highest levels. You know this guy from CNBC, from MSNBC, from Bloomberg. He has traveled the world as an investor, as an entrepreneur. He has a podcast called Truth or Skepticism from Tasty Live. Never have I met someone who understands the complexities of economics and the banking systems worldwide, who can bring them to life and break them down in some sort of palatable way, as I have this guy. Best-selling author and so generous to be with us right now, Dylan Ratigan, everybody. Yeah. Hey, Dylan Ratigan.
How are you, sir?
I'm so well, and I am really lucky to be able to bring you to my audience because I think you can break down some of what's going on. All of our heads were whipped around with the SVB intervention that was required by the FDIC and the way they intervened and the way there was a run on that bank. And then the ripple effect and the anxiety that ran through the banking system. And as we were reading, the banking system was essentially fine, but everybody was just nervous. Now I'm not so sure that's right. We've seen foreign banks succumb to what would seem to be some of the same things we've seen with domestic banks here in the U.S. I wonder if you could take us back to this SVB thing one more time and tell us what happened. The latest news out of SVB comes in Senate Banking Committee testimony, which essentially suggests that there was going to be an even bigger run on the bank and the bank's assets had another day gone by, had that Monday rolled around without the FDIC working out a deal. I wonder if you can take us back to that and then explain how this ripple effect actually affects banking worldwide.
Yeah. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. I've been really enjoyed my time getting to know you in recent days and weeks, and it's an honor to be with you. So I'm pleased to be here. I think you have to understand how banks make money before you can even, or else it doesn't make any sense. And banks really only have two choices. They can either extend loans and credit and investment to people with worse credit, basically make more money, get a higher interest rate for riskier loans, or they can make lower risk loans that don't pay back for a long time. So they only have two ways to make money. So they can either add duration, which is I'm going to loan money for a long time in order to get a higher interest rate, or they can reduce credit quality, increase risk, and give riskier loans. So everybody's familiar with 2008 and 9. That was obviously riskier loans throughout the system. So the compensation in banking since then was to add duration, right? Instead of making money through adding credit, like adding riskier credit, they decided to make money by adding longer dated loans. And so, and just understand a little bit more piece of background, because if you don't understand this, you don't understand anything. In order to solve the problem in 2008 and 9, the Federal Reserve reduced interest rates to 0% for 10 years. So because of the credit issues in 2008 and 9, there was a decade where banks could borrow money and people in general could borrow money for less than 3%, and banks could borrow it for 0%. And then in the fastest time ever, the central bank went from 0% to 5%.
So what happens to those? Yeah, what happens to those?
That's why there's stress in the system.
Okay.
So because these banks have lent money for long periods of time, they're planning to borrow money cheaper than they're lending it. So they're borrowing money at 0 and they're lending it at 2.5 or 3.5 or numbers like this. And all of a sudden they have all these long dated loans, mortgages and whatnot, that are 2.5%, 3% interest. But instead of paying 0% to borrow money to lend, they're now being charged 5%. And they're doing it on huge amounts of money. So any small movement creates massive gains and massive, massive losses. So this is relevant for two reasons. One, you have to understand, how did the banks get into the situation they're in right now? They did it by extending credit over long periods of time on the expectation that Federal Reserve would leave rates 0 or be very slow to raise them. They were wrong, and they didn't protect themselves, which is bad management by those banks.
How do they protect themselves, Dylan?
There's a litany of derivatives, just different hedging.
Insurance, essentially, against that.
An insurance rate, it's insurance on interest rates rising.
Okay.
Which reduces their returns.
Because it costs money.
So instead of making 2%, they make they got to buy the insurance. But that way, if this does flip over on them, and there's plenty of banks where this did flip over who did have insurance, M&T Bank as other ones that are fine. So that's why this happened. But the reason that this is so significant is back in the financial crisis, the government created two types of banks. The big four, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Citibank. And those four were deemed to be what's called systemically significant institutions, which means that they were legally too big to fail. And that anything that happens at those four banks will always be bailed out. And that was made law in 2000 and whatever, 10 or something, whenever they passed that law, 11. What they did with Silicon Valley Bank was they treated Silicon Valley Bank like a systemically significant bank and bailed out the whole bank. They ignored the whole FDIC insurance at $250,000. And so when they did that, they put themselves, the government, in a situation where implicitly they actually have to bail out every depositor ever. Can you imagine if they bail out Silicon Valley Bank and then the People's Bank of Detroit that has a bunch of black small business owners isn't at risk and the government doesn't help them? There'll be a revolution, and there should be. And so the point is that the Silicon Valley Bank bailout was a change in national policy to implicitly guarantee all bank deposits in an unlimited fashion.
But that's impossible, isn't it? I mean, the reserves aren't significant enough.
No, it's possible because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency.
I see.
There's an unlimited supply. Now, every time we do that, it's financial terrorism on the rest of the world because it raises the cost of grain and basic commodities. So it increases starvation in other places that are not here, but it solves our problems.
And just to stop you there, because there's more of those dollars you're saying in the world now, because you've had to print up so many to bail out these various institutions. And so that makes the value of those dollars a little less because there's so many more.
And that value, that decrease in the value of the dollar is first seen in the price of basic commodities like wheat and corn. So you don't see it in, now we're seeing inflation everywhere, but it first appears in basic commodities. So the poorest people in the world that are on the edge anyway are the ones that suffer the most because for them, it's the difference between a loaf of bread or not a loaf of bread. When you think back to the revolution in Tahrir Square, that was preceded by massive food inflation from the money printing of the financial crisis in America. So that the Tahrir Square was, in my opinion, and it was a contributing factor empirically. In my opinion, it was causal because I think when you take people's food away is when they're willing to go outside and become very reckless and aggressive, and understandably so. So my point is that they changed policy now to guarantee all the bank deposits, and in the trade-off for that is to basically kick the can on the issue of the banks into the future towards weakened currency and inflation. But the reason it's so horrifying is you're allowing the CEOs and board members of these banks to pay themselves tens of millions of dollars a year and walk around like masters of the universe, but they actually are simply using the taxpayer to do business. So once the government guarantees all the deposits, you're basically nationalizing the banks, but doing it in a way that's worse than a nationalization because you're allowing private executives to collect all of the compensation and transfer all of the risk to the U.S. taxpayer. And the reason Silicon Valley Bank is so alarming is because it made the too big to fail policy, the moral hazard of bank risk, apply to every bank, not just the big four.
Because that was implicit in their decision, is your point.
Yeah, whatever they say, the moment they said we will insure all of the deposits at SVB, they were by definition insuring all of the deposits at any bank in America and every bank in America.
So, question quickly, if they had not then interceded, if they had not then bailed them out, they'd not made a deal with FDIC funds, would that have been a better move? And what would have happened?
No. So the reason the banks have so much leverage is because they are the lifeline of all economic activity in the country. And so they're like a terrorist. So when they get into trouble, they say, listen, I know you don't want to bail me out, but if you don't bail me out, everybody's going to lose their job. Nobody's going to make payroll, dogs, cats, all these horrible things. And so it's not about bailing them out or not bailing them out. It's about the terms of the bailouts need to come with a change of control. So if you're going to come to me and say, bail me out and pay for everything, I say, fine, but I now control governance. You are now disqualified from making decisions. And instead what happens is they do the bailout, and then they allow the same people who created the problem to retain all of the money that they paid themselves in the 10 years prior to creating the problem. And they allow them to continue inside the system, which is why I think you see such an inflamed sense of frustration from the deep left and the deep right. Because even if they don't understand the detail of this discussion, they know something effed up is happening. And it's very animating for people.
So, and your point about the presumption of the economics, the underlying economics, is that something does have to be done. I mean, these are important institutions that you have to keep. Yeah,
you have no choice but to bail them out. But you need to use the bailout moment, which is a point of great leverage, to do things like transfer governance and assign liens to future earnings that then recover
some of that bailout money. Yeah. Question then about what we saw happening in overseas banks. Was that the same thing? It didn't feel like a run on the bank the way we had seen SVB or even some of these other banking institutions in this country. What's happening throughout the banking system all of a sudden?
Again, and you actually brought up this point to me last week. You have an issue with the liquidity. So a bank account historically has been thought of as something in commercial terms, it's called sticky, and that people who have banking relationships are very sticky, primarily meaning they don't want, once you're in operation, managing a flow of payments, a mortgage, a checking account, whatever it is, there's a lot of resistance to close that account and open new accounts because it's a pain in the neck, it's disruptive, all these things. With the advent of the fintech and digital banking, whether it's a legacy bank or a modern, a new co of some kind, the ease with which money can accumulate or dissipate around any one company is at a velocity that is without precedent. And so you have multiple factors happening at the same time. So to think of it like if there's I don't want to give you something too disgusting, but like a bunch of rats are discovered in a crowded at a big party.
Sure.
That's alarming for the people that see the rats, and that would be the interest rate problem for the banks. But then as word gets around that there's rats at the party, the behavior of the people that don't even ever see the rats in terms of their desire to leave, the car accidents, people racing. So this is the same thing where the initial issue creates aftershock in human behavior, which are now easy to act on an impulsive basis, which makes much more velocity to asset dissipation. And then as assets dissipate from institutions, it makes the problem, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so on the one hand, you have the real economic issue, then you're surrounded by a bunch of crazy cats that'll run at on the first sign of trouble, they're running for the door, clawing each other's eyes out. And then in Europe, you had Credit Suisse specifically, which is a financially troubled bank for 10 years, 5 years at least, basically come into the stress of everything that I was just describing, and especially in terms of the exodus and the stock price. And it took a bank that's been around since the mid 1800s and ended it, a week or two ago. That bank was probably going to go anyway. And so this is more like, it's sort of, this is the weak in the herd in this case. They were already weak. But the issue is, as each one happens, this is the same thing as one bank. So if each bank has debits and credits to other banks. And so as each bank fails, they then create problems for other banks, which is the domino issue that they were really worried about in 08, 09, and which is they're also really worried about right now, but they just don't want to talk about it. And so the only way to intervene on the domino is for the central bank, the Federal Reserve, to do a blanket insurance on all the money, which is what they did in 09. They said there is no amount of money. We have all the money. And that's basically what they've done more quietly here, implicitly because of what they did for Silicon Valley Bank. The entire process is alarming primarily because the elephant in the room is if you're going to allow bankers to take risk and accept massive compensation packages, they must be held accountable for their losses, right? Which is okay. That's let them fail. But let them fail is a self-destructive act.
Sure.
For all of us that would say let them fail morally, because they have this terrorist leverage of everybody else fails if we fail. But you can separate the banks and the function of the banks from the bankers. And what America has refused to do in 2008, 9, 10, and what it's refusing to do now is to separate the banks from the bankers.
Is that because the bankers are so mobbed up with legislators with the over? Is it essentially regulatory creep, that you see across government?
For sure, that's true. I would say you have two things. One, everything you just said, the banks control Washington. But in addition to that, the ethos, the mythology of the United States is so loyal to the mythology of the independent private sector, creative entrepreneur, Thomas Edison, Elon Musk, Henry Ford, Teddy Roosevelt, the sovereign creator. And we all love that. It's very appealing. It's the ethos of our culture. And it's why this country has so many great things, by the way, that culture has many great aspects. But in this case, that culture is being exploited by the bankers to suggest that if they are held to account in a way that the bank is funded, the depositors are funded, but they lose their ownership of both the bank right now and all future earnings, that in some way is a betrayal of capitalism. And that's a lie. That's an objective lie, because capitalism, risk resides with the risk taker, and thus the reward resides with the risk taker. In this case, the risk resides with the taxpayer, but the rewards reside with the banker. And whereas when risk is with the risk taker, risk is managed, because if it's your business and you're on the hook, you're paying a lot of attention. When I flip it, the incentive is not just different, it's the exact opposite. Because now the incentive is to get as much risk as humanly possible, because the more risk you add, the more money you make. And no matter how much risk you create, you're going to transfer it anyway. So whether it's Silicon Valley Bank doing long duration lending and crypto with no hedging, or whether it was Countrywide Financial doing ninja no income loans in Vegas, it's the same motive, which is maximize the profit potential of the bank and don't worry about the size of the risk pool, because if the cows come home, you can call the big man in DC and he'll take care of it, and he'll let us keep all the money.
Dylan, this is
which is alarming.
I'll be screamed out of the room for this, but let me ask the question anyway. What would happen, and we just have another minute or two, and this is maybe a question to put off for the next time, but nonetheless, let me just press ahead and ask you, what would happen if the banks in this country were taken over in some measure by the U.S. government? So they were no longer private institutions.
Sure. I mean, you would do it you would create a what would amount to be a bank resolution trust company. So the first thing you'd have to do is anesthetize the patient. So you would institute direct lending, which we already proved we can do in the pandemic, so that the money flows through the banks and from the Federal. So everything moves. The first thing is you can't have a disruption in the flow of payments, payroll, or risk to deposits. So that's the anesthesia, which is the Federal Reserve and direct lending. And at that point, then a bank resolution trust company that is an agent of the government comes through and does clawbacks on the compensation for the banks that took the bailout, so that the prior compensation is repaid for the board members and the CEO, because they're in charge of risk aperture. And then you organize new management and a new company, which has a first lien, or its first debt holder is the government. So future earnings are paid back through that first lien, and then the company would have an IPO. and then you would take that from the government and just issue a new IPO. So whatever XYZ bank would go into the bailout, they would go to Bank Resolution Trust. There'd be a process for the board and the CEO, direct lending, to intervene, and then a new ownership structure organized in an IPO.
And lastly, will they ever claw that money back? You mentioned
Never.
the clawback.
Billion. So the issue with the clawback is the logical thing, right? Because the money's being stolen. The reason it's such an elegant theft is you pay yourself in the 10 years before the crime is revealed.
I see. Yeah.
And then when the crime is revealed, you're like, what are you going to do? At least I got my 50 million the last few years. But the reason that no one will go near the clawbacks is because everybody, myself included, no one wants to be subject to a clawback. And the issue with a clawback is that it punishes the children and the wives and the mothers. You end up penalizing people that are not the banker, that are 80 years old, and it's some unrelated granny or daughter or whatever. And the ruthless would say, listen, stolen money is stolen money, not my problem. And I think there's probably the truth somewhere in between. But the reason clawbacks will never happen is because it's the one thing nobody wants to have happen to them. So nobody wants to press it for anybody else.
Wow. This has been a great first primer. I want more. If we could, I'd love to make, it would be great, man. I would really look forward to the next visit. So thanks,
Anytime.
Dylan.
All right.
Dylan Ratigan, everybody. Dylan Ratigan. Love it. Thanks, Dylan.
All right. See ya.
The Mark Thompson Show.
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité. I was a basketball referee.
Feels great, baby.
Who's Mark Thompson?
It's unbelievably offensive.
What he's got going here is a situation.
I was fortunate. Everyone I worked with made me better at my job.
You are a cover-up artist and you are a liar.
What up? It's our last half hour. It's going to be a great half hour.
Mark's Madness.
We've got 2 new drops in play for all of Mark's Madness, which continues this week. In the first hour, you heard My Bad going up against Seriously What the F. This hour, it's the Oprah drop.
What?
Yes, against...
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
So it's Wild Idea versus...
What?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's a wild idea, but it just might work.
You can vote in the community section of our YouTube channel. Till midnight tonight, the voting goes on for both. So My Bad, I'm Sorry, against Seriously What the F, and Wild Idea versus Oprah's What. And both are dead heats right now, according to the commissioner. Isn't that right, Commish?
Well, one of them is a dead heat. This one's Wild Idea is actually running away with it. So,
is Oprah that What right?
I know Oprah What is personally one of my favorites, which is this is very surprising.
Deep. I am. Mine is blowing up. My whole bracket is blowing up. I started so well, and now here is the celebrity bracket in Mark's Madness. If you are looking, you can see everybody who got a bracket going in Mark's Madness.
I can't believe it! Mark's
so
Madness.
I still lead the celebrities, the anemic celebrities. I don't really lead them. There's a tie going on.
Oh, you do lead because you had the most points. You had 2 correct guesses last round.
I see, okay.
So you get a couple more points for that. You get
all right.
And Daly and Snyder did not get one of them correct last round.
Okay, so it's Snyder and Daly right behind me. Then the commish. Then Michael Shore, Avila, Burkhart, and Spencer is bringing up the rear of the parade. All right. Well, we'll have Brett on maybe early next week. When are the finals?
The finals will be next Tuesday, I think. Next Tuesday.
Okay. So maybe Monday we'll get Brett and a couple of others on, but definitely Brett, and we'll kind of review the brackets. Smash the like button like a boss. If you like Dylan Ratigan, we'll try to get Dylan in regularly to talk about government, talk about economics.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod. It is a great pleasure to welcome this guy in. He's an award-winning writer-director. I'm such a fan of what he's done. Let me just throw a couple of titles at you before I bring him on. This guy's amazing. Well, you know the Hunger Games and you know Captain Phillips, okay? That's very high profile. But you will also know these other things. Shattered Glass was terrific. Breach was one of my favorites about the FBI guy who's spying for the Russians. It's this tight drama. I recommend that you stream it. All of these things are great, but take a true story and do something with it is really. He did did you see Richard Jewell? It was called. Terrific. Again, real life, and you have to tell that story, and you have to make it cinematically dynamic, and he does that. Terminator, Dark Fate, he co-produced that, and I loved an Amazon offering called The Last Tycoon, which was really terrific, and I think there was a change at Amazon, and it didn't continue as long as I wanted it to. And then finally, The Comey Rule. The Comey Rule is Trump, his interaction with Comey, and it is brilliant, and it's directed brilliantly, and I think it was a couple of episodes, or maybe maybe there were more than two. But anyway, you can tell I'm a fan. He's also a political activist of sorts. So anyway, without any further delay, I've delayed enough. But you can tell I've lavished him with praise because he deserves it. Billy Ray, everybody, come on.
Good to see you, Mark.
Billy. Yeah, good to see you, pal. Always.
How you doing?
I'm well. How many episodes was the Comey Rule? Was it two, or was it
2 nights?
2 nights, yeah. It was really, really great.
Thank you.
I'm just noticing that you really are drawn to real life in some of your writing. It seems increasingly.
Yeah, I feel like less of a fraud when I'm telling true stories, which is a good feeling. And then I found that since the election of Trump, it's just sort of intolerable to me to write things that don't in some way reflect America back to itself. That has just sort of bled into everything I've done since 2016, and I can't imagine it changing.
I also think the power of the media, and I consider you the media because I think just the same way we exported American culture through movies with Westerns and, with the shoot 'em ups and all the rest, I think to some degree we export ideas and different notions about things, and it can be done subtly or it can be done heavy-handedly, of course, but it can be done elegantly in the way that you write as well. I'm talking about to an American population.
Thank you. I mean, I really appreciate that. Picasso once said, art is a lie that tells us the truth. When you're telling a story that actually happened, whether it's Captain Phillips or Richard Jewell or Shatterglass or Breach or the Comey Rule, then you get a step inside that, which is attempting to use the medium, whether it's a feature or streaming or a pay service, whatever it may be, but use that medium so that people will understand how something happened, the why behind it. If you were to ask the average American what happened on Apollo 13, their brain just immediately goes to Ron Howard's movie. Can't help it. And if someone said, hey, who were Woodward and Bernstein? You just go right to All the President's Men. Movies have that kind of power. So if you can harness it to tell the story of what really happened between Trump and James Comey, or what the FBI really did to Richard Jewell, why not? I think it makes us. I just think it makes us a better informed public, and entertainment, of course, is the way to do it.
Of course, that makes the point so well. I just wonder, though, the challenges, particularly when I was thinking about when I watched the Comey Rule, man, you've got a lot of stuff and a lot of characters to somehow condense into a narrative that has to be compelling enough to keep me. And in the case, as you've said, of 2 nights, and you did it. But I have to think that's a really daunting prospect when you start out.
Well, here's the way to think about it. Do you know how to do the sculpture of an elephant? You start with a block of granite, right? And you chip away everything that's not an elephant. Okay, that's the only way to do it. You can't build the elephant, right? It's the only way to go. Okay, so when you're telling a true story, it's the same thing. You research everything. You read everything you can get your hands on. You interview everybody who was there, with the exception of Donald Trump, who didn't want to.
You did talk to Comey, I know.
Spent a lot of time with Comey and all the people who were around Comey and people who were not fans of Comey's, because you got to get perspective on everything.
And as I recall, Billy Ray, you were not a fan of Comey when you started out on this project necessarily.
No, not initially, and that's a separate story, which I'll tell you in a second after I make.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, it's okay. The idea is, all that research you do, that's your block of granite. And then you step back and you say, okay, where's the elephant in there? In other words, what's the story that I'm telling? And I knew from the beginning that, at least in that case, in the same way that Richard Jewell was about speaking truth to power, And Shattered Glass was about what would happen if the least popular kid in high school had to take down the most popular kid in high school. The Comey Rule was about, it was a love story between a man and an institution. And everything he did was in defense of that institution, in this case, the FBI. And everything that wasn't that just got chipped away. So when you're done, all that's left is the story you're telling. It's the elephant. And that's how you have to, at least that's how I have to approach anything that I write. The thing that I'm working on right now, which is just about to be announced, actually, it's a series that I sold to Paramount Plus, which I'm pretty excited about, is about the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. And that's another one of those just insanely research-driven pieces. This will be an ongoing series, but it's going to require, knowing, it's going to require a complete mastery of the subject, right? How do things actually work at SDNY?
And that's, to be honest, that seems like kind of a dry area. Like, you're going to have to find a way to make it sexy, for lack of a.
Oh, it'll be super sexy, because the story that we're telling is about how SDNY deals with informants, which is a fraught relationship, and it's very, very dangerous and extremely compelling. This will be a breathless show for sure.
Now, quickly, let me double back to ask you about Comey, just because you touched on him.
Sure.
A lot of people say, and I think it's perfectly defensible, that the guy threw the election. You know what I mean? I understand there were a lot of other elements, but, announcing we're reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton. I mean, I know it because of the voracious appetite of the news cycle. It may seem like a long time ago, but it was a big moment. And he made that decision to go forward with that announcement. And it might have swayed that election. How did you? Go ahead.
It's funny. I wanted that job really badly. I really wanted to adapt that book, but I had to audition for him. I had to get his approval to be the screenwriter of it. So a call was set up, and it was me in Los Angeles and the producer in Los Angeles. Comey was in McLean, Virginia, 2 of his book agents in DC and 2 of his book agents in New York. And I was going to have to pitch him, sort of my take on his book over the phone, which was not my preference. This was pre-Zoom, pre-pandemic. It was just a good old-fashioned conference call. Anyway, so for the first 10 minutes, I'm just killing. Like, everything I'm saying, he's loving. It's a love story between a man and an institution, and everything he does is in defense of that institution. Like, it's all going great. And then one of his agents said to me, "How are you going to handle the Hillary stuff?" And I said, "Well, I think we have to take it head on. I mean, I don't want to write a movie about an unflawed character." And I said, dramatically, this is Frankenstein. You created the monster, and then the monster destroyed you. And Comey said to me, "How did I create the monster?" And I said, "Well, sir, you got him elected." And there was a pause. And he said, "Well, there were other factors." I said, "That may be, but you created about a 6-point swing, and that was enough."
Wow.
And he picked me anyway. I consider that to be a story about Comey, not about me. Because if I were Comey, I would not have picked Billy to write my story, knowing that Billy felt that way. But Comey did pick me because I had been honest with him. And I can tell you, in the 18 months that followed, where I was writing and then prepping and then shooting and then editing, in those 18 months, he had a million different opportunities to sway me, to sort of body English me into one position or another to make him look better. And it never happened once. There was never a moment of, "Hey, can you get rid of that one shot of Jeff Daniels? It really makes me look like an idiot." Or, "Can you get rid of that one line? Boy, I sound stupid there." Never, not once. That showed me who the guy was. That told me about his level of integrity. And of course, the more I learned about the story and the more I learned about what the Russians were doing during that election, the more I realized that was what swayed the election for Trump.
Well, that's what you walk away with from that movie, I'll call it. There was 2 episodes. You walk away with just that the effect of the Russian influence was far greater, perhaps, than many of us understood at the time.
Oh, yeah. But everyone in the FBI understood it.
The FBI it's odd because it does have a troubled history and also a virtuous history. It's really when you see those guys with those FBI jackets show up, I usually get maybe it's just because I'm raised on cops and robbers kind of thing, I get a good feeling. But then you actually look at the history of the FBI, you see how it was weaponized in many, everything from, Martin Luther King to the civil rights movement, right?
Look,
I mean, in other words,
it's something that I think about a lot in terms of what kind of projects I want to write. To me, the idea is this: the FBI, like the Southern District of New York or the NFL, is not an institution. It is a group of people who are stewards of an institution. And those people can have good judgment or bad judgment. They can have good motives or bad motives. But the building doesn't make decisions. The people inside that building do. So the Department of Justice, run by Bill Barr, is a very different animal than the Department of Justice run by someone who actually believes in the mission. The post office run by Louis DeJoy is a very different animal than the post office run by people who think everyone should get their mail. It's the people that are inside those institutions that are guiding those institutions. And that's the story that I keep wanting to tell, whether it's the New Republic magazine or any other institution.
Sure.
What I find is, and this is what I was trying to celebrate in the Comey rule, and will certainly be celebrating in this series about SDNY, is that there's a group of Americans that Donald Trump cruelly and inaccurately labeled the deep state. And in fact, those Americans are just public servants who care deeply about our democracy and care deeply about the apolitical intentions of the institutions that are there to protect that democracy. That's what I was making that miniseries about. That's what this series is going to be about. It's something I just believe to my core because I've met so many of those public servants, and I see how they turn down 10 times the money in the private sector because they want to work at the FBI or they want to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. They want to put bad guys away. I find that to be enormously moving and very, very American.
I hadn't even thought that we'd get off this way, but I'm really glad we did, because the questions as to the Justice Department and the weaponization of the Justice Department and that whole investigation, if you will, that's being weaponized, right? Skipping over the actual weaponization of the Justice Department from the last administration to the supposed weaponization in this administration. I have friends. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I have a lot of friends who work in government and everything. I have friends at Justice who tell me during that last administration with the last President Trump, there were guys there who had really very little legal background. They were there to make sure that there were no political ties to the White House in any investigations that were going on at Justice.
Well, sure. And it's a miracle that we survived the 4 years there, but we did. The Constitution, for all of its flaws and for all the things that it didn't address, and they are legendary, set up a system of government that is unlike any in the history of the world. And the greatest stress test it could ever face, the Civil War, it faced it and it survived, it endured. The second greatest test it could face was Trump, and it survived that and endured, definitely took some blows. And we're still recovering from that in terms of norms. But if you want to talk about the weaponization of government, the United States Congress sticking its nose into the affairs of the New York City DA's office, where it has like zero jurisdiction, absolutely no right to question the Manhattan DA about anything that he may choose to do in terms of investigating a private citizen, which is all Donald Trump is now. As an ex-president, he has the same status I do. He's just a citizen. He's a citizen with Secret Service protection, but he's just a citizen. For the United States government to investigate something in which Congress has no role, that's about as much weaponizing of government as is humanly possible. And the fact that they have no sense of the impropriety of that should tell you what you need to know about Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy, and Elise Stefanik and the rest of them. They'll all get theirs, I have no doubt. I think in 2024, you're going to see a massive blue wave in the House, because I think Americans are going to say, okay, Republicans had power in the House for 2 years. What'd they do? Well, they investigated Alvin Bragg and they investigated Anthony Fauci, and they're probably going to investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, or try to impeach him, or they'll investigate Pelosi. What's that got to do with the price of rice?
Right.
Nothing. And I think they're going to pay for it. I really do.
That message is an easy one to get out, it seems. It's a question of, of getting it out. I understand we're siloed too, in this culture with, I feel as though those investigations and some of those characters to which you've just referred, they end up essentially auditioning for Fox News that night. It's almost seamless between the hearings to the TV studio, and so as long as you can,
because of the release of those texts from Tucker and Hannity,
in the Dominion,
and all the rest. The last poll I saw, 21% of Fox viewers believed in Fox News less than they did the previous month. 20% is a pretty big hit.
Yeah.
I mean, look, ultimately, 30% of this country is crazy. And 30% of this country has always been crazy. If you go back and look at what Americans were saying prior to the Civil War, it's about 30% of the country was nuts. Prior to the Second World War, about 30% of the country was into the America First movement and thinking that the Nazis weren't that big a deal. The day that Richard Nixon left office, his approval was at 29. Trump is right now hovering around 31. It's the same people. Yeah. They can't be moved. They seem like a more organized bloc than they ever did before because they now have the internet on which to find one another. And yeah, that's a significant factor. But if 30% of this country is crazy and just unmovable, that means 70% of the country is not. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people you can reach and a lot of people you can sway.
And increasingly it is about those independents. Yeah.
And a lot of people who can come to the light. And I believe that's what is happening. And I believe that process is unstoppable because ultimately the alternative is so unappealing. I mean, take a listen to what Donald Trump's talking about now. That guy's not exciting anybody. None of the mojo he had in 2016 is working for him now. And the people behind him, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, George Santos, Jim Jordan, I just don't see them bringing any independence over the line. So I think they're going to pay a huge price in 2 years. I do.
It's a clinging to power, and I get it. That's what they're doing. But the grim realities of what control has brought this country, I'm talking about taking away a woman's right to choose. I'm talking about these really draconian legislative moves on the part of an activist Supreme Court, and now, as you say, a GOP in charge. It's scary. I want to ask you a question off politics and onto writing. I mean, really, you're, I'm a fan personally and professionally, but I just think your writing is so elegant, so brilliant, and you had to bring in all of these various disparate elements and tell a story in all these ways that we talked about. And now, and this is part of the labor negotiations with the WGA, I think, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. You have this AI, and AI is actually being used to generate any number of synopses about story ideas and even cranking out scripts. I wonder if you can just give me your take on the way that technology is going to affect your world.
I wish I had something brilliant to tell you about it. And I'm sure AI would have something brilliant to tell you about it. I don't know. I like to think that I'm not a machine, although I work like one. I really do try to pretend that I'm a mechanic and not an artist, and that I just get up in the morning and I get under the hood and I fix things. I do think 95% of screenwriting is problem solving, and maybe there's a way that AI can problem solve effectively. But then there's that other 5%. There's that 5% of writing that has to do with, can you invent characters? Can you create magic? Can you write dialogue? Do you have a soul? I can't imagine AI can replace that. If it can, well, then I guess a bunch of us are going to be fucked. I don't have a more eloquent answer than that. And look, I know that Americans are famous for their arrogance in looking towards the future. And by that, I mean, there was a point in 1910, 1912, somewhere around there, I forget the exact date, Congress was going to shut down the U.S. Patent Office because everything had been invented, right? There was a phone, there was a light bulb, there was a car, and everyone said, well, that's it. Like, what else is there? And they literally were going to shut the patent office down. So I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who says, no, this can never happen. It's hard for me to picture, very hard for me to embrace. And at this point, it's got nothing to do with me. So I'm just going to keep pretending I'm a mechanic. I'm going to spend my days under the hood, problem solving, and hoping that extra 5% that can't be taught is going to be something that differentiates me from some sort of machine.
And you know something? That extra 5% actually separates a good movie or a good series from just a
inside every great movie is a terrible movie trying to get out, right? Like, I mean, you can make Jaws or you can make Anaconda. They're not that different, but one is just executed at the highest level possible and the other is not. And humans made those choices. Humans executed those decisions, and that's why that movie's an all-timer.
Indeed, Carl's been on the show several times. Actually, he's a great writer.
Well, Carl has that famous line: "It's always Jaws week somewhere."
I've never heard that line. It's applause-worthy, that line. Hey, Billy Ray, we'll watch for this project, I guess, next, and
yes.
You'll when you are ready to pull it out of the oven and serve it, you'll let us know. We'll give it some love.
I would love to do that. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, you too, pal. Really great. The great Billy Ray, everybody. Thanks, Billy.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Yeah, you really are terrific. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, so cool. Love it. What do I do? Am I a little behind, Albert, or am I okay?
The Mark Thompson Show.
I think I'm okay on time. I do want to recognize some people who stepped up today. We've really had a great show. What a great capper. Billy Ray is super smart, huh?
Yeah, that was a really good interview. You're talking about people who showed up. People did not show up to vote against. A producer has no idea yesterday. So I'm still not happy about the people showing up. But we do have a lot of we do have a lot of kind people who have contributed this today. So here we go, starting with Ann Herring.
Big shout out to Ann. Thank you for jumping into the virtual tip jar, Ann, for $9.99. Tiff MLA, love listening to you guys every morning for $19.99. Big shout out. Big Dan Ashley shout out to you. Thank you so much, Tiff. We're completely crowdfunded. It's true. I know it's weird. We always had Steve Moskowitz. I saw in the chat people asking about Steve Moskowitz, and I have explained it before, but I'll explain it again. He sort of signed on for a limited run for 3 months. He extended that run, and now he's and now that run is over, So, it's not a very complicated thing. There was no acrimony at all. But without Steve, we're completely crowdfunded. So we appreciate all of you stepping up because, frankly, that's the only way we make payroll. Enid Fox for $19.99. Thanks for having Ratigan and excellent guest. Yes, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the $20, Enid, and that does help. And yes, I agree. Dylan is terrific, and we'll have him on again. You heard him. He said anytime. Wes Theory for $5. What up, Wes?
Thank you
so much, Wes, for every bit of your contribution, which is so very much appreciated. The Nikki Maduro show is beginning in just a minute. Join us at noon, she says. Wisconsin teacher joins us to explain why her school banned first graders from singing a song about love and acceptance. Clark Reed has tech news. Frank Somerville speaks to Cron about DUI. Oh, I thought she was going to have him on, but she's going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, did he?
He had an exclusive last night about coming up with his struggles with addiction. So
I see.
We weren't really on the Frank Somerville beat, but I do like to see where the KTVU guys are at. So I did watch the story.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm sure Nikki will play back the interview, is what she's saying, and discuss it. I deliberately, when I was on KGO, left it alone because I felt the guy might be going through some personal struggles. And when you live life out loud and you have to be on the news all the time and people are critical about your every look at how people are critical of how ghost white I am. That's
You're critical about that. No one else is as critical as you.
Oh, all right. Well, then it starts with me. But anyway, my point is I wanted to leave it alone because I was worried about.
And you were right, too, because we only saw it play out. We didn't know what was going on. We just saw his mishaps on the air. So it's nice to see that he's turning things around right now.
Yeah. Well, Nikki has a great show, and that is beginning now. You love Mark T. We love Mark T. Love Kim, Albert, and Tony. Yes. In fact, I'll tell you, Tony. I got some new drops sent to me for Tony. And I will play. Yeah, Trevor in Concord actually sent me some new drops. Yeah, and I'll play them for you. We just didn't have time today, but I'll play them for you tomorrow. Tomorrow, David Katz will examine the legal situation as it sits with Gwyneth Paltrow, with Donald Trump. If it's in a courtroom or likely to go to a courtroom, David Katz will have the answers for us. Belinda with It's the Planet Stupid tomorrow as well. I feel like we have a special guest tomorrow also. I just can't think of who it is. Mark, your show is particularly excellent today. Mr. Ratigan and Mr. Ray were fascinating guests. Thank you so much. From Ms. M. They were great. I love it. Yeah. So we'll have them back. Both of them. You heard
much.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so
much.
And thank you so much. And thank you.
Thank you.
Love you all. A big love you all. Until tomorrow.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Johnson Show. Bye-bye.
Head over to Nikki's show.
Bye-bye.
Kim, thanks for playing her today.
Thank you.
Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.